Hello, I'm Sam Zambito, and the purpose of this videotape is to help you to get the most out of your EVI or EWI by learning the best setup procedures for the internal sound module so that you can have the maximum expressive potential out of your wind synthesizer. On the instrument's face, we have the vibrato adjustment, pitch bend, glide, and breath sensitivity. But before we talk about that, I would like to talk first about the EVI's fingering system. The way the instrument works is by manipulating this canister at the far end of the instrument, we change the octaves by moving our thumb over this series of rollers. Now, the other job that the left hand plays on this instrument is to touch this metal bar on the front of the actual canister. By touching this, it would lower an open fingering from an open C down a perfect fourth to an open G. It works the same in every octave. So whenever you're fingering a scale, the fingerings will always be the same as they would be on trumpet, as if you were descending from C in the staff to C below the staff. There are places in the fingering system that I like to call breakpoints, and they occur whenever you have to manipulate the canister and do one of two different movements. One movement is changing from one roller to the next, and the other is when you're also combining that with touching the bar. This also can be combined with the fingering on the right hand. The way this fingering system works specifically is as follows, and I will play a descending chromatic scale from one C to the C below. I would consider the breakpoints in that to be when I go from the open or the upper A flat to the open G. That would constitute, I would constitute that as a breakpoint. The other is when I'm going from the lowest note in that octave, or any note, to the next octave by actually changing the canister position. So by rehearsing these over and over, using other etudes that you've practiced in the past, you can quickly get accustomed to it and be playing it fluently very quickly. There's another aspect of the fingering system on this instrument that is unique to it. There are three little posts opposite the valves, and these can be engaged with the fingers of the right hand also. And as opposed to the valves which lower the pitch exclusively, these raise the pitch, and they allow you to have some flexibility in creating alternate fingerings, or they can be used as trill keys over the breakpoints. Like to play a C to D trill would be rather difficult and could tend to let you glitch. This way you can play it with just the first valve. The actual pitch change of the three is up a major second, up a minor second, and up a major third, and they can be combined. As you play with it longer and longer, you'll find your own fingerings that work into special musical situations. The next most important aspect of setting up the instrument would be the breath sensitivity. I think that the way you should do that is to first set the knob on the bottom so that you can hear the pitch starting to be produced, and then turn it back perhaps the distance between two dots on the dial. Then, once you've accomplished that, I would say start by turning the inside knob fully counterclockwise and blow into the instrument as hard as you would when you're playing a fortissimo. Then begin turning that knob clockwise, and the sound will get louder and brighter. When it gets to the point where the sound doesn't get any louder or brighter, you'll know that the instrument is producing a very loud, bright sound, and you will be able to adjust it in that area or that range so that you are getting the full expressive range out of the controller. By the time I stopped blowing, you noticed that I was turning it back and forth, and that was to find the optimum spot. Now it should respond to my breath pressure very subtly. As you could hear, it had a very broad dynamic and timbral range, and that is because the breath sensitivity in this transducer is being sent to two destinations in the synthesizer. One, the voltage-controlled filter, which makes the sound get darker and brighter, and to a voltage-controlled amplifier, which makes it get louder and softer. So when you combine the two of those, when you do a crescendo, the sound can get soft and dark to loud and bright, which is a quality of acoustic instruments, and it allows you to simulate those kind of instrument sounds very easily. When you have the breath sensitivity set just right, doing multiple tonguings as I just did is very simple. You should become accustomed to letting the air escape and controlling the volume and all by just the general breath pressure. You don't actually blow through the instrument. You can get the feeling that you should have by trying to blow into your little finger. Then you'll have it done precisely. I'd like to point out one thing, that when you're first learning to play this instrument, and perhaps the first time you pick it up, it might be a good idea to take some of these sensitivity controls, such as the pitch bend width, which is the center knob, and turn it all the way counterclockwise, the glide counterclockwise also. This way you won't be accidentally engaging some of these parameters by simply touching them. Since everything is touch sensitive, you need to become completely aware of everything that you're touching at all times. But in the long run, this will add greatly to the expressiveness of the instrument when you get control of all of these things. Now that we've discussed the controls that need to be turned down, let's discuss how we can set those so that they can be of the most musical value to us. Let's start with vibrato. Depending on how hard you want to be pushing on the vibrato switch will determine where you want to set the sensitivity level. I generally set it between 10 and 11, but you can determine that by the way you play it. The further clockwise that you turn this control, the deeper the modulation will potentially be. Now, the next adjustment below that is the bend control. And there are two knobs for this control. The outer one is labeled adjust, and in order to adjust this one or set it up, you have to turn it back and forth until the little light is not showing. If it is showing, it means that the instrument will be out of tune either above or below the center point. Now, the inner knob is marked width, and by turning that, you will adjust how far you can actually bend the pitch. You'll notice that when you do actually touch the pitch bend pads, the light will come on to let you know the center of the pitch is being bent one way or the other. So don't be concerned about that. I also would like to point out that the pitch bend pads will work much more smoothly if you cover them with a small piece of Scotch tape. It makes the response very smooth, whereas without it, it tends to have a little bit of a jump when you first touch them. Below that, the next adjustment is marked glide, and this engages the portamento. And on the EVI, this is induced by biting on the mouthpiece. First, you can set the bottom of two knobs by which is marked adjust to determine how hard you want to bite on the mouthpiece to actually engage the portamento. So as you're looking at the module, when you start biting on it, you'll see it come on when you get it set to the appropriate level. You should set this to wherever it's comfortable for you. The inner knob is marked time, and when it's set completely counterclockwise, the speed of the portamento will be virtually instantaneous. Now, as I turn it clockwise, it slows the portamento down. The further clockwise that you turn this knob, the slower the portamento is. Now, when I set it to the maximum there, you could hear that it was going very slowly as it started, and as I released the bite pressure, the speed increased also. So as you get more accustomed to playing this and getting used to the bite sensitivity, you will be able to have very subtle control of the portamento. Now I'd like to introduce J.R. Krisanda. We will play a duet together, and then he will tell you a little bit about the EWI. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, my name is J.R. Krisanda, and I'm here to tell you about some of the basic points about Akai's new EWI wind controller. The EWI has allowed a system for fast, effortless fingering, eliminated as many movable parts, and also maintained the expressive nature of the woodwind instruments. Let's first talk about the instrument itself. The EWI has no moving keys. This will take time to get used to, but in a very short period of practice, it will actually tighten up your fingering technique on all your acoustic instruments, as well as the EWI. This touch-sensitive fingering system also eliminates any replacement or repair to worn or broken key assemblies and embouchure parts, such as reeds or exposed pickups within the mouthpiece. Getting used to or comfortable on the EWI should be approached as with any other instrument. Exercises, etudes, scales, etc. should be practiced daily to obtain facility. Since you are most likely accomplished on your woodwind instrument, a slow approach with practice sessions is advisable so that you don't get frustrated with new techniques or initial lack of light speed facility. Take your time and develop your own personality on the EWI. I feel that this is the strongest value of the EWI or EVI. It allows and even encourages individuality in your playing style. Although much of this personal approach will be developed within parameters and setups of your EWV sound module or other sound sources, you will be able to control all phases of your playing, such as breath sensitivity. An example. A second parameter would be vibrato. Now, unlike the EVI, the vibrato within the EWI is controlled through the mouthpiece and not by the bar on the side. A good example, if we can get nice and close here, is in setting the vibrato, as with the EVI on your module, is the same. Another portion of a parameter would be gliding and bending. The gliding adjustments are the same on your module as with the EVI, but a good way to exemplify this is to go down and show you the instrument. On the glides portion of your EWI is located on the bar over here. So when I want to establish a glide parameter, all I do is roll my thumb over to touch that bar. Also, bending is the same as on the EVI. It's controlled by this portion on the bottom or the top of your thumb section. Okay, the EWI control adjustments will tailor the EWI to your own playing style so that you will flow easily from your other instruments. The EWI is exactly what it is named, an electronic woodwind instrument. Although saxophonists will find fingering easy, clarinet techniques will also benefit the overall approach to playing the EWI. The clarinet techniques become evident in the use of the right and left hand small finger clusters, located over here, being this one instrument. Over on your right, you have 3 keys. To use these, I will play a C scale descending, and the first time I'll use a straight saxophone technique. The second time, I will also do the same scale, but I'll use a clarinet technique. The second passage I did was with the saxophone style fingering. Now I'm going to show you how to apply that to a chromatic scale. We will start with C and go chromatically down or descending in a saxophone fingering style. That was a saxophone fingering style. Now a clarinet, and you'll notice that you use more of your left and right hand fingering clusters. These techniques are extremely useful in fast and difficult passages, so get used to learning alternate fingerings and experiment to create your own fingering system. Now let's discuss glitching. This is a term that many synthesists use to describe an uneven or undesirable transition between 2 or more notes or audio signals. Although some parameters within your synthesizer may be used to smooth over these glitches, let's spend a brief moment with the human part of the solution. While practicing, pay special attention to the octave rollers on your left-hand thumb section. Start out slow and get used to octave jumping using both your thumb and alternate fingerings. An example. You will find that most glitches will disappear almost immediately with practice, but the most troublesome areas where this occurs are what I like to call breakpoints. Breakpoints are points of balance between certain intervals that include changing octave rollers and are harder to control than others. This is where the combination of fingering techniques of saxophone and clarinet is most helpful. One example is the D natural to C sharp interval in a descending scale. When you move in sax style, you must release to no fingers in the C sharp while moving between octave rollers. This is harder to balance than a standard clarinet fingering of the same interval, because the breakpoint is now between the B natural and A natural, which would incorporate other fingers to enhance balance. You may find other techniques to suit your own style. Experiment. This is where the EWI allows for individuality. So to sum up our introduction to the EWI, let's say that the EWI is a hybrid instrument that allows woodwind players to have the same facility on all synthesizers as they do with their respective acoustic instruments, and even more expressiveness than keyboard instruments. Because it is a hybrid, though, the EWI, which will require some practice and attention to develop its full potential. And although this introduction to the EWI has not attempted to go into great detail, we hope that it has enlightened you on how to approach its eventual mastery. Good luck.
Thanks, JR. Now let's talk a little bit about the internal sound module. This instrument is basically an analog synthesizer with two sound sources, each one capable of producing a unique sound of its own. A lot of these sounds we will be listening to just one sound source at a time, such as this. But it is possible to play more complex sounds that actually sound more than one pitch at a time. Okay, the way this works is if we push the edit button right here, we can see that the window tells us oscillator 1 is tuned up 7 half steps and oscillator 2 is up 12 half steps. This is all completely programmable, as well as many other parameters of the synthesizer. There's a voltage controlled filter, voltage controlled envelope, and your breath can be programmed to affect any of these, as well as the actual pitch of the sound and many other parameters. For example, here's one sound where the breath pressure actually affects the pitch. By doing that, it gives the sound a whole different character than if it had stable pitch. Another really interesting feature of this synthesizer is the formant filter. This instrument was invented by a man named Nyle Steiner, and Nyle was always perplexed that there weren't any synthesizers that could really produce the sound of solo strings. So he set about to study these instruments and discovered that all stringed instruments had very similar looking harmonic distortion if we were to analyze it. So he created a filter that created harmonic distortion very similar to that of a stringed instrument. And this is the result. The feature can be very noticeably witnessed if you just turn the filter itself off, and you'll hear what the sound sounds like without the filter. With the filter, here are some other sounds that use the formant filter that have a completely different nature. That being a double reed instrument. Other double reeds that sound kind of interesting are like this bassoon sound. Once again, that was using the formant filter and also transposing the two oscillators to different pitches. There's some other drastically different acoustic sounds that we can get. Once again, here's one that alters the pitch with the breath. And here's another one that's also quite different. So you can hear the breath controls very many different qualities of sound just by getting louder and softer. Let's see, we also have envelope generators, and this for both the VCFs and the VCAs, so that you can control the timbral change over time, not with just your breath, but also having it happen automatically, and you can combine the two to get very interesting effects. Here's the same guitar sound with the envelope generator. And those envelopes can also be set to do the exact opposite of that, which is probably more typical, and those would be called spikes. So even by playing soft, you'll still get a loud, bright attack. we're back to the basic patch of a brassy type sound. Now I'm going to show you a way to modify this sound so that you can take advantage of the external audio input. This allows us to take external sound modules that we're controlling through MIDI and telling the external sound module what notes that we're playing and perhaps some other expressions such as vibrato and pitch bend. But instead of just sending the output of the sampler to the mixer and onto the speakers, we're going to process that sound through the breath control circuitry so that we can give it the full advantage of all of this breath control that we've got from this controller. Now, the reason we have to do that, instead of just sending all of that information out through the MIDI cord and trying to tell the external module all of the performance nuances that we're playing, because the format of MIDI is a computer-based language, and therefore it's digital. So every change in expression has to be represented with a number, and therefore the response is going to be somewhat stepped. And you'll be able to feel and hear this. It's just not nearly as sensitive as what we as wind players are accustomed to feeling, because if we do a crescendo from a virtual whisper to very loud, that change in volume and brightness is continuously variable. When we do it through MIDI, the range from completely off to completely on is 128 steps, which really is quite a far cry from infinity, or being infinitely variable. So this internal sound module is an analog-based synthesizer. Therefore, everything is controlled with changes in voltage, and control voltage is a continuously variable value, which if I was to blow from soft to loud on this sound, the change from soft to loud was continuously variable. It's just infinitely small steps. And likewise with pitch bend, vibrato, those are all the same. It's all control voltage. Now if I was doing that strictly through MIDI, all of those changes would be in just little steps, and it ends up having an annoying little feel. It's sort of like a zipper effect. If you go through it quickly, a fast change in dynamics will be actually felt by the player, and it can be kind of annoying. So the way we avoid that is to program the synthesizer module that we're playing to produce a very loud, bright sound. Even if you had a keyboard and you were to push down the key, that sound would be as loud and bright as you possibly could produce it. Then it's sent to the control module here and processed through the filter and the amplifier, which are breath controlled from here. So now I will first show you that by pushing the edit button, the window says oscillator 1 frequency. So what we do is hit the backwards button, and it says external balance. Now if we put that to -100, source 1 now will only be passing through the sounds that are coming through the external input. Now what we can do is go over to the bottom row and push number 5, which is level. This way we can turn the level output of source 2 off so we don't hear it any longer. Now we no longer hear anything coming out of the synth module. Now we turn up the output of source 1 to 100%, so that now the output of what's coming in through the external audio in will be the only thing that we can hear. Now that was being played by this sampler down here. What I'm going to do right now is turn the volume of this off completely. Once again, you can no longer hear this internal module, and I will turn up the sampler just directly through the board so you'll hear the actual output of the sampler. Now there is no breath control of the sound, and this is what it actually sounds like without going through the sound module. So you can hear all of the notes sound a lot alike, so it's very consistent. All the attacks are loud and bright, and you don't really have very much expressive control. Once again, now I'll turn this back up and bring this down, and now we'll only be hearing the output through the module and then back into its own channel. Now we'll try another sound. Here's just a different sample. Here's one. Okay, so you get an idea of some of the different timbres that we've got here. Oh, here's my new favorite. Bass harmonica. One other thing that's very interesting about this system is that we can also play chords out through MIDI. This synthesizer module is capable of storing 16 internal voicings, which once they're stored in its memory, you can assign in each patch a chord function just by hitting the button that says chord, and it'll say off or on, and you can engage it, and then you'll be able to hear the chords that you've assigned. But you can take, for every note in the chromatic scale, you can assign its own individual chord voicing, allowing you to actually program moving polyphonic lines if you wish, or you can assign the same chord to every note. You can also assign just octaves or unison notes, anything that you really wish to. Now we'll listen to this instrument down here playing some chords. So that's the polyphonic capability. It's also capable of playing moving lines in this manner. Great. Now I'd like to finish all this up by playing a sequence that I input all of the parts using the EVI. I put in the drum parts, the bass parts, and all of the piano comping parts using the chord feature. And it goes something like this.